There is a unique magic to the American road trip. It's a promise whispered on the wind, a gospel of gasoline and asphalt. The idea that you can fill up your tank, pick a direction, and just drive. Leave the past in the rearview mirror and chase the horizon. It's a story of freedom, of discovery, of finding yourself on the long, lonely stretches of blacktop that stitch this country together. But there is another side to that story, a darker side. Because for every mile of freedom, there is a mile of isolation. For every beautiful, sun-drenched landscape, there is a dark, empty stretch of road under a moonless sky. The open road doesn't just lead to new places, sometimes it leads to nowhere. Sometimes the things you find in the middle of that nowhere are not friendly, and sometimes the person who starts the road trip is not the same person who finishes it. Tonight on Mr. Chill Chapters, we are getting behind the wheel and driving headfirst into the darkness. We are exploring the stories that are told in hushed tones at greasy spoon diners at 3 a.m., the tales that are whispered over the crackle of a CB radio. These are not stories of flat tires or bad directions. These are 11 true, disturbing accounts from drivers who took a wrong turn. Not on a map, but in reality itself. They encountered things on the road that defy explanation, things that are ancient, hungry, and waiting patiently in the vast empty spaces between the cities. So check your mirrors, lock your doors, and turn up the volume. The road is calling, and it has some terrible stories to tell. Story 1, The Last Stop. My name is Kevin. This happened to me in the winter of 2019. I was a college student driving home for Christmas break. It was a long 16-hour drive from my university in Colorado back to my family's home in rural Oregon. I was young, broke, and stupid, so I decided to do the whole drive in one straight shot, powered by cheap coffee and loud music. The first 12 hours were a blur of interstate highways and familiar landscapes. But as night fell, I turned off the main highway and onto the final leg of my journey. A long, desolate two-lane road known as Highway 97, which cuts through the vast, empty high desert of eastern Oregon. It was late, probably around 2 a.m. The world outside my car was a pitch-black, featureless void. The only light was the twin beams of my headlights cutting a small, lonely tunnel through the darkness. My gas gauge was hovering just above empty. I had been pushing my luck, hoping to make it to the next town. It was a stupid gamble, and I was about to lose. Just as a cold knot of panic began to tighten in my stomach, I saw it. A faint, flickering neon sign in the distance. It was a single word: gas. Relief washed over me, so powerful it almost made me dizzy. It was a gas station, a single, solitary point of light in the middle of an ocean of darkness. It was an old-fashioned place, the kind you rarely see anymore. It had a small, brightly lit office and a single, ancient-looking gas pump under a rusty metal awning. The sign above the door just said "The Last Stop." It seemed appropriate. I pulled in. The place was eerily quiet. There were no other cars. I got out of my car, the cold, dry desert air a shock after the warmth of the heater. The only sound was the hum of the neon sign and the faint, mournful cry of the wind. The door to the office opened and a man stepped out. He was old, thin as a rail, and dressed in a clean but faded mechanic's uniform with the name Jed stitched over the pocket. He had a kind, wrinkled face and pale, watery blue eyes. "Running on fumes, son?" he asked, his voice a dry, friendly rasp. "You have no idea," I said, laughing with relief. "I thought I was going to be spending the night out here." "Well, you made it to the right place," he said, smiling. "This is the last stop for 100 miles in either direction. Fill her up?" "Yes, please," I said, handing him my credit card. He looked at the card in his hand, then back at me. He shook his head slowly. "Sorry, son. Card machine's been on the fritz for 20 years. Cash only." My heart sank. I was a broke college student. I never carried cash. I opened my wallet. I had a crumpled $5 bill and some change, not nearly enough to fill my tank. I only have $5, I said, my voice filled with a new, fresh wave of despair. Jed looked at me, his pale eyes seeming to see right through me. He was silent for a long moment. Well, he said finally, that's a problem. But maybe we can make a different arrangement. What kind of arrangement? I asked, my hope flickering back to life. We have a different kind of currency here at the last stop, he said, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone. A road tax, you could call it, for travelers who find themselves short on funds. A road tax? I asked, confused. Aye, he said. The road gives and the road takes. You've had a long journey. You've seen a lot of things. You've made a lot of memories on your way here. The road just asks for a little piece of that journey back. A toll. This was getting weird. I was tired and cold and just wanted to get home. Look, man, I said. I don't know what you're talking about. I just need some gas. The toll is a memory, son, Jed said, his voice patient, as if explaining something very simple to a child. A small one. Something you won't miss. A memory from your trip. Just a little piece of the road you've traveled. You give me a memory and I'll give you a full tank of gas. It's a fair trade. I stared at him. He had to be crazy. A lonely old man who had spent too many nights in the desert, his mind cooked by the sun and the solitude. But I was desperate. And what was the harm in playing along? Okay, I said, deciding to humor him. A memory. How do I give it to you? Jed smiled, a genuine warm smile this time. It's easy, he said. Just close your eyes and think of something from your drive today. Something clear. The sunrise over the mountains this morning. The taste of the bad coffee you had at that diner in Utah. The song that was on the radio when you crossed the state line. Anything. Just hold it in your mind. I'll do the rest. It was insane. But I was out of options. I closed my eyes. I decided to give him something insignificant. I thought of the drive through the Rocky Mountains earlier that day. I remembered a specific moment. I had pulled over at a scenic overlook. I remembered the breathtaking view of the snow-capped peaks, the crisp, cold mountain air, the feeling of awe and insignificance in the face of such vast natural beauty. It was a beautiful memory, but it was just one of many. I could afford to lose it. I held the image in my mind, focusing on the details. The jagged peaks, the deep blue of the sky, the dark green of the pine trees. I felt a strange, tingling sensation in my forehead, a gentle cooling pressure as if a single cold finger was being pressed against my skin. It wasn't painful. It was pleasant. It was a feeling of being unburdened, of a small weight being lifted from my mind. The sensation was gone as quickly as it came. I opened my eyes. Jed was standing in front of me, a soft, satisfied smile on his face. His pale, watery eyes seemed a little clearer, a little brighter. He looked refreshed. "Thank you, son," he said, his voice sounding a little stronger. "That was a good one. The mountains are always a fine vintage." He patted the gas pump. "A deal's a deal. Full tank on the house." He took the nozzle and began to fill my car. I stood there, my mind reeling. I tried to recall the memory of the scenic overlook, and I couldn't. I knew I had driven through the mountains. I had a vague intellectual knowledge of it. But the specific memory, the image, the feeling, the awe, it was gone. There was just a smooth, blank, empty space where it used to be. It was like a book with a single, crucial page torn out. I felt a profound and terrifying sense of violation. He had taken something from me, something real. Jed finished filling the tank and hung up the nozzle. There you go, son, he said, his voice cheerful. That should get you home. What did you do to me? I whispered, my voice trembling. Jed's smile faded. He looked at me with a kind of weary pity. I told you, son. The road tax. The road is long and it gets hungry. It needs to be fed. We're just the collectors. We? I asked. He gestured with his head back towards the dark, empty desert. There are other stops like this one, dotted along the lonely roads. We all serve the road. We take the toll. We keep the balance. What are you? I asked, my fear turning to a cold, hard dread. I'm just a man who made a deal a long, long time ago, he said, his voice filled with a deep, ancient sadness. I was like you once, young in a hurry, ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere. I pulled into a place just like this one, and I paid the toll. He looked down at his own hands, his wrinkled, age-spotted hands. The first one is free, he said softly. A full tank for a small memory, but the road is always hungry. And once it has a taste of you, it wants more. You'll be back, son. Sooner or later, you'll find yourself on another lonely road low on gas, and you'll see another one of our signs, and you'll have to pay the toll again. And what happens when you run out of memories? I asked him, the horrifying implication dawning on me. Jed looked up at me, and for the first time I saw the true, profound, and eternal exhaustion in his pale blue eyes. That's the final toll, son, he whispered. When you have nothing left to give, when your past is a blank, empty road, then you get a new job, you get a uniform, and you get to work at the last stop, collecting tolls from the next generation of lost travelers. You become a part of the road. He looked at the name stitched on his uniform. My name wasn't always Jed, he said, his voice a bare whisper on the wind. I don't remember what it used to be. I traded that memory for a tank of gas back in '63. I got in my car. I didn't say another word. I started the engine and I drove away from that place, away from that terrible, sad, and hungry old man. I did not look in my rearview mirror. I made it home. But I was not the same. I was a man with a hole in his memory, and I was a man who was terrified of empty roads. I live my life differently now. I never let my gas tank get below half full. I avoid the back roads, the lonely highways. I stick to the crowded, well-lit interstates. But sometimes, late at night, when I am driving, I can feel it. A strange, tingling pressure in my forehead. A hunger, the road calling for its next meal. And I know that Jed was right. I know that one day I will be on a lonely road again. And I will see that faint, flickering neon sign in the distance. And I will have to decide which part of myself I am willing to trade for a few more miles. Because the road gives, and the road takes, and its hunger is eternal. Story 2. The radio that gives directions. My name is Sarah. My husband Tom and I are what you might call analog people. In a world of smartphones and GPS, we still love the feel of a paper map, the thrill of navigating by landmarks, the simple, tactile pleasure of the old ways. In the summer of 2021, we bought our dream car, a beautifully restored 1968 Ford Mustang, a classic piece of American muscle. To celebrate, we decided to take the ultimate analog road trip, a journey down the forgotten stretches of Route 66, from Chicago to Santa Monica, using only vintage maps and our own wits. It was supposed to be a celebration of a simpler time. But on a lonely stretch of road in the Arizona desert, we tuned into a radio station that wasn't on any dial, and we learned that some old voices should be left to the static. The trip was everything we had dreamed of. We saw the kitschy roadside attractions, the ghost towns baking in the sun, the vast open landscapes that had inspired a generation of travelers. The Mustang was a dream, its powerful V8 engine a rumbling, throbbing heartbeat carrying us west. The problem started in Arizona, somewhere between Holbrook and Flagstaff. We had decided to take a scenic detour, a stretch of the original pre-interstate Route 66 that was marked on our old 1960s map but had long since been bypassed and forgotten. The pavement quickly gave way to a cracked, sun-bleached asphalt and then to a rough, dusty dirt road. The landscape was brutal and beautiful. Red rock formations, sparse, hardy desert scrub, and a vast, empty blue sky. We hadn't seen another car for hours. It was just us, the Mustang, and the endless, empty road. And then the car died. There was no warning. The engine just sputtered, coughed, and fell silent. Tom, who knew his way around a classic car, popped the hood. After an hour of tinkering and cursing, the diagnosis was grim. The fuel pump had given out. We were stranded. There was no cell service. Our high-tech smartphones were useless bricks. We were completely, utterly, and analogly screwed. As the sun began to set, casting long, strange shadows across the desert, a real primal fear began to set in. The desert is not a friendly place at night. The temperature plummets. And the things that hunt in the dark are not kind. We sat in the silent car, the vast, indifferent silence of the desert pressing in on us. It was in that moment of despair that Tom, fiddling with the knobs on the dashboard, switched on the car's original AM radio. The radio was a beautiful, archaic thing with a glowing dial and a satisfying mechanical click as you turned the knob. We hadn't used it for the whole trip, preferring the silence or our own music. Tom turned the dial. Static. More static. And then, a voice. It was a man's voice, a classic, old-timey radio announcer's voice, smooth as whiskey and warm as a campfire. It was crystal clear with no static, as if the station was right next to us. And that was Patsy Cline with Crazy, the voice said. You're listening to KROAD, the voice of the traveler broadcasting live from somewhere in the great American desert. We've got a special dedication going out now to a couple of lost souls in a beautiful blue Mustang. Don't you worry, folks, the road always provides. Tom and I stared at each other, our mouths open. He knew our car. He knew we were lost. A new song began to play. A slow, haunting, instrumental guitar tune. How is this possible? I whispered. I have no idea, Tom said, his eyes wide. A local station? Maybe they saw us from a hill? The song ended and the announcer's voice returned. All right, folks, time for our roadside assistance segment. For our friends in the Mustang, it sounds like you've got a busted fuel pump. Now you're in a bit of a pickle, but like I said, the road provides. If you just follow this old road about 5 more miles, you'll come to a turnoff on your left. It's not on the new maps, but it's there. You'll see a single dead mesquite tree as a marker. Take that turn. About a mile down that track, you'll find an old, abandoned service station. The place has been closed for 50 years, but if you look in the back room under a pile of old rotten tires, you'll find what you're looking for. A brand new, in-the-box fuel pump. A perfect fit for a '68 Ford. We were speechless. This was impossible. It had to be a prank, a trick. What do we do? I asked. What can we do? Tom replied, a strange, desperate hope in his eyes. It's a 5-mile walk. It's better than sitting here waiting to freeze. We locked up the car and started walking. The desert at night was a strange, alien world. The moon was bright, casting everything in a pale, silvery light. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of our own footsteps on the gravel. After what felt like an eternity, we saw it. A single, skeletal, dead mesquite tree, its twisted branches reaching for the starry sky like a gnarled hand. And just beyond it, a faint, barely visible track, leading off into the darkness. We took the turn. We walked for another 20 minutes, and then we saw the silhouette of a building against the horizon. It was an old, dilapidated service station, just as the voice had said. The sign was rusted and shot full of holes. The gas pumps were skeletal remains. The door to the station was unlocked. We stepped inside. The place was a wreck, covered in a thick layer of dust and sand. In the back room, we found a pile of old, cracked and rotten tires. With a shared, desperate look, we started moving them. They were heavy, and they crumbled in our hands. And then under the last tire, we saw it, a cardboard box covered in dust but otherwise pristine. The label on it was faded, but we could still read the words, Ford Motor Company Fuel Pump, Partxture C8Z9350B. It was the exact part number for our car. We opened the box. Inside, nestled in a bed of yellowed straw, was a brand new, gleaming, perfect fuel pump. We ran back to the car, our hearts pounding with a mixture of elation and a deep, profound, and terrifying sense of unease. This was not just luck. This was not a coincidence. This was something else. It took Tom another hour, working by the light of a flashlight, to install the new pump. When he was finished, he got in the car, turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a beautiful, powerful, and life-saving sound. We sat there for a moment, listening to the engine hum. Tom turned on the radio. The same smooth, whiskey-warm voice was there, as if he had been waiting for us. "And a big congratulations to our friends in the Mustang," the announcer said. "Glad we could be of service. Now, you're probably wondering how to get back to the main road. Don't you worry. Just keep KROAD tuned in and I'll guide you home." For the next hour, we followed his directions. He guided us through a maze of unmarked dirt roads and forgotten tracks, his voice a calm, reassuring presence in the darkness. He played old, classic road songs, songs that seemed perfectly chosen for our journey. He told stories, old rambling tales of the desert, of the ghosts of the road, of the strange things you see when you're a long way from home. "Turn right at the three-headed cactus," he would say. "Take the left fork when you see the rock that looks like a sleeping giant." His directions were strange, but they were perfect. We were moving through a landscape that was not on any map, guided by a voice from a radio station that shouldn't exist. Finally, we saw the blessed, familiar sight of headlights in the distance. We were approaching a paved road. We were approaching the interstate. "Well, folks," the announcer's voice said, a note of finality in his tone, "this is where we leave you. You're back in the world of maps and street signs now. You won't be needing us anymore." "Thank you," I whispered to the radio. "Whoever you are, thank you." The announcer chuckled, a warm, friendly sound. "Think nothing of it, ma'am. We're always here for the lost travelers. That's our job. Just one little piece of advice before you go." "What's that?" Tom asked. "This road you're on," the announcer said, his voice growing a little more serious. "It's a good road, but it's not the only one. There are other roads, older roads that run alongside it just out of sight. And sometimes, if you're not careful, you can take a wrong turn and end up on one of them. And those roads, they don't always lead back." A new song started to play, a slow, sad, and final-sounding tune. "And one more thing," the announcer said, his voice now a faint whisper as if he was fading away. "If you ever find yourself lost out here again, don't trust the voices on the radio. Not all of them are as friendly as me." And then the radio fell silent, not to static, to a complete and perfect and terrifying silence. We pulled onto the interstate. We were back in the real world. We never found the station again. We searched the dial, but KROAD was gone. We looked at the maps, but the service station, the turnoff, the three-headed cactus, none of it was there. We made it to Santa Monica. But the rest of the trip was different. The magic was gone. It was replaced by a quiet, gnawing fear. We had been saved by a miracle, a ghost, a guardian angel of the airwaves, but his final warning haunted us. There are other roads, and not all the voices are friendly. We sold the Mustang when we got home. It was too much of a reminder. We bought a new, reliable, boring car with a state-of-the-art GPS and satellite radio. But sometimes, late at night, when we're driving on a lonely road, I'll turn on the AM radio. I'll turn the dial past the angry talk shows and the fire and brimstone preachers. And I'll listen. I'll listen for that smooth, whiskey-warm voice. The voice of the traveler. And I'll wonder, was he a ghost? A memory trapped in the airwaves, or was he something else? A gatekeeper? A guide who helps the lost find their way back to the right road? And I wonder about the other voices he warned us about. The unfriendly ones. What directions do they give? What abandoned service stations do they lead you to? And what do you find in the back room under the pile of old, rotten tires? I don't know, and I don't want to find out. I just know that the air is not empty. It is full of stories and full of voices, and some of them are waiting for you to get lost, so they can tell you which way to go. Story 3. The Headlight Game. My name is Chloe. I'm a night owl, always have been. There's a peace to the world after midnight that you just can't find during the day. The roads are empty, the air is cool, and the world feels like it belongs to you and you alone. I used to love taking long, aimless drives in the middle of the night, just me, my car, and a good playlist. It was my therapy. But one night, on a lonely stretch of highway in rural Texas, the road decided to play a game with me. It was a simple game, played with headlights. But it was a game with stakes I couldn't possibly have understood. And it was a game I am still to this day trying to figure out how I survived. This was back in 2018. I was living in Austin and had just gone through a bad breakup. My mind was a chaotic mess of anger and sadness, and I needed to clear my head. So I did what I always did. I got in my car and I drove. I didn't have a destination. I just drove west, out of the city, into the vast, dark expanse of the Texas Hill Country. By 1 a.m., I was on a 2-lane highway, miles from anywhere. The road was a straight, black ribbon cutting through a landscape of dark, rolling hills and scrubby mesquite trees. The moon was a thin, silver sliver, and the stars were a brilliant, cold fire in the black sky. It was perfect. The solitude was exactly what I needed. I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour. I was completely alone, and then I saw a pair of headlights in the distance coming towards me. It was a normal sight, but after so long without seeing another soul, it felt significant. As the car got closer, it did something a little strange. It flashed its high beams at me. 2 quick flashes. Flash, flash. I figured it was a friendly warning. Maybe there was a cop ahead or a deer on the road. I flashed my own high beams back, a single quick flash, a silent thanks. The car passed me, a big old pickup truck, and disappeared into my rearview mirror. I thought nothing more of it. About 10 minutes later, another pair of headlights appeared in the distance. As this car got closer, it did the same thing. 2 quick flashes. Flash, flash. This time I was a little more curious. 2 cars in a row with the same signal? Maybe it was a local thing, a kind of hello on these lonely roads. I decided to play along. I flashed my high beams back, 2 quick flashes this time, matching their signal. Flash, flash. The car, a small sedan, passed me. As it did, the driver honked their horn, a short, cheerful little beep beep. It felt like I had given the correct response, like I had passed a small secret test. A little smile played on my lips. It was a silly, simple game, a way to break the monotony of the long, dark road. For the next hour, the game continued. Every car that came towards me without fail would give the same signal, 2 quick flashes of their high beams, and I would respond in kind with 2 quick flashes of my own. And every time as they passed, they would give a friendly little honk. I was a part of a secret club, the Club of the Midnight Drivers. I felt a sense of camaraderie, of belonging. I was no longer alone. And then I saw the car that changed the rules. It was a single headlight in the distance, a motorcycle maybe. As it got closer, I saw that it was an old beat-up car with one of its headlights burned out. I waited for the signal, but it didn't come. The car just kept coming, its single baleful yellow eye fixed on me. I felt a strange sense of disappointment. The game was over, this driver wasn't playing. As the car got closer, I decided to initiate the signal myself. Maybe they were new to the area. I flashed my high beams. Flash, flash. The reaction was instant and terrifying. The moment my flashes cut through the darkness, the other car swerved violently, its tires screeching on the asphalt. It swerved into my lane, directly into my path. I screamed and yanked my steering wheel to the right, my own tires screaming in protest. I managed to avoid a head-on collision by inches. The other car, the one with the single headlight, swerved back into its own lane and sped past me, its engine roaring. As it passed, the driver laid on the horn, not a friendly beep, but a long, loud, and angry blare. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. What the hell had just happened? Had the driver been drunk, asleep at the wheel? But it had happened the exact moment I flashed my lights. It felt like a reaction, a violent, angry reaction. I sat there for a few minutes trying to calm my racing heart. I decided the game was over. It was too dangerous. From now on, I would just drive. I pulled back onto the highway. The road was empty again. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was menacing. About 20 minutes later, another pair of headlights appeared. My body tensed. As the car got closer, it gave the signal. Flash, flash. I did nothing. I kept my hands firmly on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the road. I did not respond. The car passed me, and there was no friendly honk. Instead, as it passed, the driver laid on the horn, the same long, angry blare as the car with the one headlight. And in my rearview mirror, I saw the car's brake lights flash. It was slowing down. It was turning around. A cold, liquid dread filled my veins. This was not a friendly game. This was something else. And I had just broken the rules. I floored it. My small car's engine screamed as I pushed it faster and faster, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. I saw the headlights of the other car now behind me growing larger, brighter. It was chasing me. I was driving at over 100 miles an hour on a dark, two-lane highway. It was reckless. It was insane. But the terror of the car behind me was greater than my fear of crashing. The other car was faster. It was gaining on me. Its headlights filled my rearview mirror, blinding me. And then it started flashing its high beams at me. Not the simple flash-flash signal from before. This was a frantic, angry, and demanding flashing. Flash, 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 flash. It was like it was trying to tell me something, or demand something. I didn't know what to do. I was panicking. My mind was racing. What were the rules of this game? What had I done wrong? And then I saw another pair of headlights coming towards me from the opposite direction. As the oncoming car got closer, it gave the signal. Flash, flash. I had a split second to make a decision. The car behind me was right on my tail, its lights flashing manically. The car ahead was approaching fast. On a desperate, insane impulse, I decided to play the game again. I flashed my high beams back at the oncoming car. Flash, flash. The moment I did it, two things happened simultaneously. The oncoming car, a large SUV, let out a friendly beep-beep as it passed me. And the car behind me, the one that had been chasing me, slammed on its brakes. It swerved violently and pulled off the road, its headlights disappearing as it came to a stop in the dust. I had given the right answer. I had saved myself. I kept driving, my foot pressed to the floor, not daring to slow down. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and terror. What was this game? What were the rules? It was a test, a password. The two flashes were a question, and the two flashes back were the answer. It was a way of identifying who belonged and who didn't. The drivers on this road at this time of night, they were all part of something. A club, a cult, a secret society of the highway. And they were checking on each other, the car with the one headlight. It wasn't one of them. It was an outsider, an intruder, just like me. And when I had given the signal, they had mistaken me for one of their own, and had tried to attack the outsider. And when I had broken the rules, when I had failed to give the signal back, they had identified me as an outsider. And they had turned on me. I was prey. I drove for another hour, my body rigid with fear. Every pair of headlights in the distance was a potential threat. Every flash was a test. I played the game. Every time a car approached and flashed its lights, I flashed mine back. And every time I was rewarded with a friendly honk, and the car behind me, if there was one, would fall back. I was safe as long as I knew the password. I finally saw the blessed glow of a town on the horizon. As I approached the city limits, the game stopped. The cars became normal. No signals, no secret codes. I was back in the real world. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, my body shaking uncontrollably. I went inside and ordered a coffee, my hands trembling so much I could barely lift the cup to my lips. I never drove on that road at night again. I don't know what that club was. A local tradition? A gang? Something older and stranger? I don't want to know. But I know that the open road is not as empty as it seems. It has its own rules, its own tribes, its own secret languages spoken in flashes of light. And if you find yourself on a lonely road in the middle of the night and a game begins, you had better learn the rules very, very quickly. Because on those dark highways, there is a big difference between being a player and being the one who gets played. And sometimes the only thing that separates you from the hunters is knowing the right signal to flash back into the darkness. Story 4. The Hitchhiker Who Doesn't Want a Ride. My name is Ben. I'm a salesman. I sell industrial-grade solvents, a job that requires me to drive through the most forgotten Rust Belt corners of the American Midwest. My territory is a patchwork of dying factory towns, endless cornfields, and long, straight two-lane highways that stretch to a vanishing point on the horizon. It's a lonely job, and you see some strange things out on those empty roads. But nothing, in 20 years of driving, prepared me for the man I met on a lonely stretch of road in rural Indiana. He was a hitchhiker, but he didn't want a ride. He wanted a race. This was in the late summer of 2020. I was on my way back from a sales call in a town that had more boarded-up windows than people. It was late afternoon, that golden, hazy time of day when the sun is low in the sky and the world seems tired. I was on a county road, a straight, flat ribbon of asphalt cutting through an endless sea of tall, green corn. The corn was high, at least 8 feet tall, creating a solid green wall on either side of the road. It was like driving through a tunnel made of plants. I saw him from about a half-mile away. A figure standing on the shoulder of the road. A hitchhiker. He was a tall, thin man dressed in old, dusty, dark-colored clothes. He was standing perfectly still, his back to me, staring out into the cornfield. He wasn't holding a sign. He wasn't sticking out his thumb. He was just standing there. As I got closer, I slowed down, as I always do when I see someone on the side of the road. It's a habit, a small act of caution and courtesy. As I passed him, I glanced over. He didn't turn. He didn't move. He just stood there, a silent scarecrow-like figure staring into the rustling green sea of corn. I thought it was strange, but I shrugged it off. The world is full of strange people. I sped back up and continued on my way. About 5 minutes later, I saw him again. I blinked, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Up ahead, on the right shoulder of the road, was the same man. Tall, thin, dressed in the same dusty dark clothes. Standing in the exact same position, his back to the road, staring into the cornfield. This was impossible. I was doing 60 miles an hour. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me. There were no side roads, no intersecting paths. Just the single straight road and the endless impenetrable wall of corn on either side. My logical mind scrambled for an explanation. A twin? A local prank? A very, very fast runner? None of it made sense. I slowed down again as I approached him. This time I looked more closely. It was him. The same frayed collar on his shirt, the same worn-out boots, the same strange, still posture. As I passed, I honked my horn, a short, questioning beep. He didn't react. He just stood there, a silent, unnerving sentinel, his attention fixed on the corn. A cold, prickling unease began to creep up my spine. I drove on, my eyes constantly flicking to my rearview mirror. The figure grew smaller and then disappeared. I drove for another 10 minutes, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. My eyes were scanning the road ahead, my heart pounding with a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. And there he was, up ahead, on the right shoulder, standing, staring into the corn. This time I slammed on my brakes. My car screeched to a halt about 100 feet behind him. I had to know. I had to understand. I sat there, my engine idling, and I watched him. He didn't move. He didn't turn. It was as if I wasn't even there. I put my car in drive and slowly, cautiously rolled up alongside him. I rolled down my passenger side window. "Hey, buddy," I called out. "You okay? You need a ride?" The man did not turn his head, but he spoke. His voice was a dry, rustling whisper, like the sound of the cornstalks themselves rubbing together in the wind. "No, thank you," he said, his voice calm and polite. "I'm not going anywhere." "But I've passed you 3 times, I said, my voice trembling slightly. "How are you getting ahead of me?" The man was silent for a long moment, then he chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Getting ahead?" he whispered. "Oh no, I'm not getting ahead, I'm just keeping pace." And then he turned his head, slowly. He turned, and he looked at me. His face is a memory that is burned into my mind, a brand of pure, undiluted horror. It was a long, thin, and impossibly old face, the skin like dried leather stretched over a skull. But his eyes were not human. They were large and round and completely black, like the eyes of an insect, and they were filled with a vast, ancient, and terrifying amusement. He smiled, a slow, wide, and lipless smile. "You're a fast driver," he whispered, his black eyes fixed on mine. "But I'm a fast walker." And then he did something that broke my understanding of the world. He took a step, not towards me, not away from me. He took a step sideways, directly into the solid, impenetrable wall of corn. He didn't push the stalks aside, he didn't break them, he just passed through them. For a single horrifying second, his form was a shimmering, distorted silhouette within the green stalks, and then he was gone. He had been swallowed by the corn. I didn't wait. I screamed a high, thin animal sound, and I stomped on the gas pedal. The tires spun on the gravel shoulder, and then the car shot forward. I drove with a blind, primal terror that I have never known before or since. I didn't look in my rearview mirror, I didn't dare. I just drove, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, my mind a screaming chaos. I drove for what felt like an hour, my car's engine whining at the high RPMs. I finally saw the blessed, beautiful sight of an overpass in the distance. The interstate, civilization, safety. As I approached the on-ramp, I risked a glance to my right into the cornfield that still lined the road. And I saw him. He was not standing. He was walking. He was walking parallel to my car, deep within the cornfield. He was moving with a long, slow, and impossibly graceful stride. He was not running. He was not hurrying. He was just walking. And he was keeping pace with my car, which was still doing over 80 miles an hour. He turned his head and looked at me right through the rows of corn. And he smiled, that same wide, lipless, and terrifying smile. And he gave me a small, polite, and final nod. A nod of acknowledgement, a nod that said, "Good race." And then he turned his head forward and continued his walk, disappearing into the endless green depths of the corn. I swerved onto the on-ramp and onto the interstate, my body shaking so violently I could barely control the car. I was surrounded by other cars, by trucks, by the noise and the light of the real world. I was safe. I have never taken that road again. I have, in fact, requested a new sales territory, one that is filled with mountains and forests and has no cornfields. I don't know what he was. A ghost? A demon? A local god of the corn? A genius loci, the spirit of that lonely, forgotten place? I have a theory. He was not a ghost. He was something that lived in the corn, something that could move through it as easily as a fish moves through water. The cornfield was his ocean, and the road that ran through it was his shoreline. He wasn't a hitchhiker. He was a spectator. He stood on the edge of his world, and he watched our world, the world of noise and speed and machines rush by. And sometimes when a car caught his interest, he would play a game, a race. Not a race of speed, but a race of persistence. A race to prove that his slow, steady, and ancient pace was more constant, more relentless than our frantic, fleeting, and temporary speed. He didn't want to ride. He didn't want to harm me. He just wanted to prove a point. He wanted to show me that his world, the world of the green, silent, and ancient corn, was faster and more powerful and more real than mine. And he did. I am a salesman. I live in a world of highways and deadlines and speed. But sometimes when I am driving past a field of tall corn, I can feel it, a strange, watchful presence, and I can almost hear a dry, rustling whisper on the wind. "Good race," it says. Good race. Story 5. The rest stop attendant. My name is Maria. I'm a long-haul trucker. I've been driving for 15 years, and I've seen it all. The good, the bad, and the downright weird. I've learned that the road has its own rules, its own rhythms, and its own ghosts. But the most terrifying thing I ever encountered wasn't a ghost or a monster or a madman with a hook for a hand. It was a man named Charlie. And he was the attendant at a rest stop in the middle of the Nebraska plains. He was the kindest, most helpful, and most terrifying man I have ever met, because his kindness was a cage, and his rest stop was a prison. This happened in the dead of winter, 2017. I was on a cross-country run hauling a load of frozen vegetables from California to New York. I was behind schedule, pushing hard through a nasty blizzard that had turned the highways into a treacherous sheet of ice. The wind was howling, the snow was coming down in a thick white curtain, and the visibility was near zero. It was dangerous driving, and I was exhausted. I had been driving for 14 hours straight, my eyes burning, my body aching. I knew I needed to stop to get some sleep, but I was in the middle of nowhere, a vast, flat, and empty expanse of white. And then, through the swirling snow, I saw a sign. A simple blue and beautiful sign. Rest area 2 miles. I almost wept with relief. I pulled into the rest area. It was a small, modest place. A small brick building with restrooms, a few vending machines, and a parking area for trucks, separate from the cars. There were only 2 other trucks there, their engines idling, their cabs dark. As I was pulling into a spot, a man came out of the main building. He was wearing a bright yellow raincoat and carrying a powerful flashlight. He waved me down, guiding me into a parking spot with a friendly, professional air. I shut down my engine. The sudden silence a blessed relief. The man walked up to my driver's side door. I rolled down my window. He was an older man, probably in his 60s, with a kind, weathered face, a neat white beard, and bright, cheerful blue eyes. He had a name tag on his raincoat that read, "Charlie, at your service." "Nasty night to be on the road, ma'am," he said, his voice warm and friendly. A welcome sound after hours of nothing but the howl of the wind. "You're telling me," I said. "Glad you folks are open?" "We never close," Charlie said with a proud smile. "The road never sleeps, so neither do we." "You look beat. You planning on staying the night?" "That's the plan," I said. "Just need a few hours of shut-eye." "Well, you came to the right place," he said. "Best little rest stop in Nebraska. The coffee's always hot, the restrooms are spotless, and we've got the best vending machine snacks this side of the Mississippi. My wife, Martha, she stocks them herself. She's got a real knack for it." He seemed genuinely proud of his little rest stop. His enthusiasm was infectious. "First cup of coffee's on the house," he said, winking. "A welcome gift for a weary traveler." I was touched by his kindness. In my line of work, you don't encounter a lot of that. Most rest stops are cold, impersonal, and vaguely menacing places. This one felt different. It felt welcoming. I went inside. The building was just as he had described. It was immaculately clean. The floors shone. The chrome on the vending machines gleamed, and there was a fresh pot of coffee brewing, its rich aroma filling the air. A small, plump, and equally cheerful-looking woman with a name tag that read Martha was wiping down the counters. She smiled at me as I came in. "Welcome, dear," she said. "Charlie said you were coming. Help yourself to some coffee and try one of these. They're fresh." She pointed to a plate of what looked like homemade oatmeal cookies. I poured myself a coffee and took a cookie. It was the best cookie I had ever tasted. The coffee was strong and hot and perfect. I sat at a small, clean table, sipping my coffee, feeling the exhaustion begin to recede, replaced by a warm, comfortable sense of safety. Charlie and Martha bustled around, cleaning, stocking, and humming cheerful tunes. They were like a pair of friendly, helpful grandparents. "You get some rest now, dear," Martha said as I finished my coffee. "You've earned it." I went back to my truck, feeling better than I had in days. I climbed into my bunk, and for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep instantly. A deep, dreamless, and profoundly restful sleep. I woke up what felt like many hours later. The sun was streaming through the window of my cab. I felt incredible. I was completely rested, my body free of the usual aches and pains of a long haul. I felt renewed. I looked at my watch. It was 10 a.m. I had slept for a solid 8 hours. The blizzard had passed. The sky was a brilliant, clear blue. I got out of my truck, stretched, and took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. It was a perfect day. I saw Charlie sweeping the parking lot, humming a cheerful tune. "Morning, Charlie," I said. "Thanks for the hospitality. That was the best sleep I've had in years." "Glad to hear it, ma'am," he said, smiling his kind, grandfatherly smile. "We aim to please. You want another cup of coffee before you hit the road?" "I'd love one," I said. I went back inside. Martha was there, baking a fresh batch of cookies. The smell was heavenly. She greeted me with the same warm smile. I had another coffee, another cookie, and I chatted with them for a while. They were a lovely couple. They told me they had been running this rest stop for 40 years. It was their life's work, their passion. "We just love taking care of the travelers," Martha said. "It's a hard life on the road. Everyone deserves a safe, clean place to rest. After about an hour, I knew I had to get going. I was still behind schedule. "Well, thanks for everything," I said, standing up to leave. "I've got to get back on the road." Charlie's smile faltered just for a second. "So soon?" he said. "The roads are still a little slick. Why not stay for lunch? Martha's making her famous chicken pot pie." "That sounds amazing," I said. "But I really have to go. The company's going to have my hide." "Nonsense," Martha said, bustling over. "1 more hour won't make a difference. You need a good meal in you." Their insistence was a little strange, but I chalked it up to old-fashioned hospitality. "I really can't," I said, trying to be polite but firm. "Thank you again for everything." I walked towards the door. As I reached for the handle, Charlie stepped in front of me, blocking my way. His friendly smile was gone. His bright, cheerful blue eyes were now cold and hard and filled with a strange, desperate disappointment. "I don't think you should go just yet," he said, his voice no longer warm but flat and toneless. "Excuse me?" I said, my hand freezing on the doorknob. "You're not ready," he said. "You're still tired. You need more rest." "I feel fine, Charlie," I said, a cold knot of fear forming in my stomach. "I need to leave. Now." "No," he said, his voice a low, firm command. "You will stay. You will rest. It's for your own good." Martha was standing behind him, her cheerful smile also gone, replaced by a look of grim, unyielding resolve. She was holding a rolling pin in her hand, her knuckles white. I looked past them out the window at the parking lot. The other 2 trucks were still there, and I realized with a jolt of pure horror that they were the same 2 trucks that had been there when I arrived last night. They hadn't moved. "What is this?" I whispered. "What's going on?" "This is a rest stop, ma'am," Charlie said, his voice a cold, patient monotone. "A place for weary travelers to rest. And we take our job very, very seriously. We provide the best rest in the world, a perfect, deep, and endless rest." I finally understood. The coffee, the cookies, the deep, dreamless sleep. It wasn't just hospitality, it was a sedative, a powerful, fast-acting sedative. They weren't just attendants, they were keepers, jailers. I backed away from the door, my mind was racing. I was trapped. "Why?" I asked. "Why are you doing this?" "Because the road is dangerous," Martha said, her voice a sharp, scolding hiss. "It's full of accidents and breakdowns and lonely, terrible deaths. It's no place for good people. We're protecting you from it. We're keeping you safe. Here, with us." I looked around the immaculate, cheerful, and terrifyingly clean room, and I saw it. On a shelf behind the counter, among the neat stacks of paper cups and napkins, was a row of small, framed photographs. They were photos of truck drivers smiling, men and women of all ages. And I recognized one of them. A man named Frank. A driver I knew from the road. He had disappeared about a year ago. His truck had been found abandoned at a rest stop in Nebraska. He was never seen again. His photo was there. He was smiling, but his eyes were dull and empty and vacant. "You're all prisoners," I breathed. "We are not prisoners," Charlie said, his voice filled with a righteous indignation. "We are resting. We are safe. We are at peace." I had to get out. I looked around for a weapon, an escape route. The only other door led to the restrooms. I made a break for it. I shoved past Charlie and ran into the women's restroom. I locked the door behind me. The restroom was, as promised, spotless, and it had a small, high window. It was my only chance. I could hear them outside pounding on the door. "Come out, dear," Martha's voice cooed, a terrifying parody of her earlier kindness. "It's time for your nap." I climbed onto the toilet, then onto the sink. I managed to unlatch the window and push it open. It was small, but I thought I could squeeze through. I pulled myself up and through the window, scraping my arms and legs on the frame. I fell to the ground outside into the cold, clean snow. I ran. I ran to my truck, my heart hammering against my ribs. I fumbled with the door, my hands shaking. I got in, locked it, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. Charlie and Martha came out of the building. They were not running. They were just standing there, watching me, their faces filled with a profound and terrible and parental disappointment. They looked like parents whose child was running away from home. As I threw the truck into gear, I saw the doors of the other 2 trucks open. 2 men got out. They were wearing the same dull, vacant expressions as the people in the photographs. They started walking towards my truck, slowly, mechanically, like zombies. I didn't wait. I stomped on the gas, and my truck shot forward out of the parking lot and back onto the highway. I drove for 100 miles without stopping, my eyes glued to my rearview mirror. No one followed me. I reported it to the police. I told them everything. They investigated. They found the rest stop. But it was abandoned. It had been closed for years. The building was derelict, the windows boarded up, the gas pumps rusted skeletons. There was no sign of Charlie or Martha or the other trucks. But in the dust-covered interior, they found a single, fresh oatmeal cookie sitting on a clean spot on the counter. I am still a trucker, but I never, ever stop at the small, lonely rest stops anymore. I only stop at the big, bright, noisy truck stops, the ones filled with people and life, because I know that there are places on the road that are not just places of rest. They are places of capture. They are run by kind, smiling, and utterly insane keepers who believe they are saving you from the dangers of the road. They are saving you from life itself. They are offering you a perfect, clean, and eternal rest. And I know that there are trucks out there parked in lonely rest stops, their engines cold, their cabs empty, their drivers resting forever in a deep and dreamless and perfect sleep, their smiling, vacant faces immortalized in a small framed photograph on a shelf behind the counter of the kindest and most terrifying rest stop in the world. Story 6. The Detour Sign. My name is David. I'm a father. That's the most important thing you need to know about me. In the summer of 2016, I packed my wife, Emily, and our 2 kids, 8-year-old Maya and 6-year-old Leo, into our minivan for a classic American road trip. We were driving from our home in Ohio to see the Grand Canyon. It was supposed to be a trip filled with cheap motels, greasy spoon diners, and the kind of cheesy, wonderful memories that families are built on. It was, but it was also the trip where we took a detour that wasn't on any map, a detour that led us to a place where the laughter is eternal and the fun never ever stops. We were somewhere in the vast empty plains of eastern New Mexico. The landscape was a flat, sun-baked expanse of brown and yellow stretching to a hazy, heat-shimmering horizon. The kids were getting restless in the back seat, their chorus of, "Are we there yet?" becoming a relentless mantra. Emily was trying to navigate with a temperamental GPS that kept losing its signal. It was in this state of mild, familial chaos that we saw the sign. It was a standard orange diamond-shaped construction sign planted on the shoulder of the empty 2-lane highway. But the words on it were handwritten in a cheerful, slightly childish scrawl. Detour. Road ahead closed. Fun this way. An arrow, also hand-drawn, pointed down a narrow, dusty, and unmarked dirt road that branched off from the highway. "What do you think?" Emily asked, looking up from the GPS, which was currently showing our location as a blinking dot in a sea of blank beige nothingness. "I don't know," I said. "It looks unofficial." "But it says fun this way." Maya piped up from the back seat, her voice filled with the pure, undiluted optimism of an 8-year-old. Maybe there's a circus or a fair. Yeah, a circus, Leo echoed. I hesitated. My rational mind, the responsible father, was screaming that this was a bad idea. You don't follow strange hand-drawn signs down unmarked dirt roads in the middle of nowhere. But the other part of me, the tired father who had been listening to whining for 3 hours, was tempted. What was the harm? It was broad daylight, and the promise of fun was a powerful lure for my bored, restless children. All right, I said, making a decision that I will regret for the rest of my life. Let's see where it goes. A little adventure. The kids cheered. I turned the minivan onto the dirt road. The road was rough and the minivan bounced and jostled, sending up a plume of yellow dust behind us. We drove for about 10 minutes, the road winding through the flat, featureless landscape. There was no sign of any construction, no reason for the main road to be closed. The feeling of unease in my gut grew stronger. And then we saw the second sign. It was another hand-drawn sign, this one nailed to a rickety wooden fence post. It had a crude, smiling face drawn on it, and the words, "Almost there, get ready for Happy Land." Happy Land, Maya squealed with delight. I glanced at Emily. Her face was a mask of forced enthusiasm, but I could see the same unease I felt reflected in her eyes. We drove for another mile, and then we saw it. It rose out of the heat haze of the desert like a bizarre, impossible mirage. It was an amusement park. It was not a modern corporate theme park. It was an old, classic, and deeply unsettling carnival. A rusty, skeletal Ferris wheel stood silent against the blue sky. A carousel, its painted horses faded and chipped, sat motionless. A roller coaster. Its wooden tracks, warped and weathered, snaked through the park like the bleached bones of a dead serpent. The whole place was a riot of faded, peeling paint, rust, and decay. It was clearly abandoned. It had probably been closed for 50 years, but it wasn't abandoned. As we got closer, we could hear music. Faint, tinny, and distorted, it was the cheerful, repetitive, and maddeningly upbeat music of a carousel. And the rides were moving. The Ferris wheel was turning slowly, its empty cars rocking gently in the wind. The carousel was rotating, its chipped horses rising and falling in a silent, ghostly gallop. The roller coaster was running, an empty train clattering and groaning its way up the lift hill. The park was operating, but it was completely, utterly, and terrifyingly empty. There were no people, no workers, no crowds. Just the rides moving on their own, in the silent, sun-baked desert, playing their tinny, ghostly music to an audience of no one. "Dad, can we go?" Leo asked, his face pressed against the window, his eyes wide with a child's pure, unadulterated wonder. "No," I said, my voice a harsh, guttural croak. "No, we can't." I was about to put the van in reverse to get us out of this nightmare place when we saw them. Figures. Emerging from between the rides, from the shadows of the dilapidated game booths. They were mascots, the kind of oversized costumed characters you see at theme parks. There was a giant smiling bear with a top hat, a cheerful-looking pig in overalls, a happy round-faced clown with a permanent painted smile. There were about a dozen of them. They walked towards our van, their oversized feet shuffling in the dust. They waved at us, their big white four-fingered gloves making slow, friendly, welcoming gestures. But there was something wrong with the way they moved. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like marionettes with tangled strings. And their costumes, they were filthy, stained with dirt and rust, and something that looked horribly like old, dried blood. The painted smile on the clown's face was cracked and peeling, revealing a dark, empty void beneath. The bear's friendly plastic eyes were dull and scratched and lifeless. "Look, Mommy, it's Barnaby Bear," Maya shouted, recognizing a character from an old forgotten cartoon she had seen on a DVD. The bear mascot stopped in front of our van. It waved, a slow, jerky, and deeply menacing gesture, and then it beckoned to us. Come, come and play. I didn't need any more convincing. I slammed the van into reverse and stomped on the gas. The tires spun, kicking up a cloud of dust, and then the van shot backwards. The mascot's reaction was instant. Their friendly waves stopped. Their cheerful postures changed. They began to run towards us. They ran with the same jerky, unnatural, and horrifyingly fast gait. The clown's head lolled to one side, its painted smile a fixed manic grin. The pig's cheerful curly tail had fallen off, revealing a rusty metal spike beneath. I spun the wheel, turned the van around and floored it, heading back the way we came. In the rearview mirror, I could see them chasing us, a silent, relentless and terrifying army of decaying, smiling nightmares. They kept pace with the van for a horrifyingly long time, their jerky loping run an impossible gravity-defying feat. And then, as we reached the edge of the park, they stopped. They stood in a line, at the boundary of their domain, and they watched us go. And as we sped away, the bear mascot raised its hand and it waved. Not a friendly wave, a slow, deliberate, and final goodbye. A wave that said, "You'll be back." We found the highway. The hand-drawn detour sign was gone. We drove to the next town in a state of shocked, terrified silence. The kids were crying in the back seat, no longer seeing the fun, only the horror. We checked into a motel. I spent the night online searching for any mention of an abandoned amusement park in that part of New Mexico. I found nothing. No records, no photographs, no history. The place didn't exist. But I did find something else. I found a series of old, unsolved missing persons cases from that area going back decades. Families on road trips who had just vanished. Their cars were always found abandoned on the side of the highway near an unmarked dirt road. And then I found the story of Happy Land. It was a local legend, a ghost story told to scare tourists. The story said that an amusement park had been built in the desert in the 1950s, but a terrible accident on opening day had killed several children. The park was shut down, cursed, and left to rot. The legend said that the spirits of the children who died there and the guilt-ridden man who had designed the park still haunted the place. They were lonely, and they were always looking for new playmates. They would lure families in with promises of fun. And once you were in Happy Land, the fun would never, ever stop, because you would never, ever leave. You would become a part of the park, a new, smiling, and permanent resident. I looked at my daughter Maya sleeping in the motel bed, clutching a small stuffed bear, Barnaby bear, the same bear we had seen at the park, and I felt a cold, sickening dread. We had escaped, but had we really? The next morning, as we were packing the van to leave, Leo, my 6-year-old, came up to me. He was holding something in his hand. "Look what I found, Daddy," he said. He opened his hand. In his palm was a single round plastic token. It was faded and dirty. On one side was a smiling cartoon bear. On the other side were the words, "Happy Land, admit one, good for eternity." He hadn't found it. It had been given to him, or planted on him. It was a ticket, a rain check, an invitation to come back and play. We finished our trip to the Grand Canyon, but the joy was gone. The world seemed less real, less solid. We were a family haunted by a memory, by a place that shouldn't exist. We are home now. We are safe. But the token is still here. I tried to throw it away, but it always comes back. I find it in my pocket, in my car, on my nightstand. It is a constant, silent reminder, and the kids, they've changed. They are quieter. And sometimes, late at night, I can hear them whispering to each other in their room. They are playing a game. They are talking about their friends, the bear and the pig and the clown. They are waiting. They have their tickets. And they are waiting for the day when we take another road trip. They are waiting to go back to the place where the fun never stops. They are waiting to go home, to Happy Land. Story 7. The Billboard Family. My name is Alex. I'm a photographer. I don't shoot weddings or portraits. I shoot emptiness. My subjects are abandoned buildings, forgotten towns, and the vast, lonely landscapes of the American West. My work is about the beauty of decay, the stories left behind in the rust and the dust. In the fall of 2022, I was on a solo road trip through the desolate basin and range country of Nevada, looking for ghosts to capture with my camera. I found one, but it wasn't in a ghost town or an abandoned motel. It was on a billboard that was telling a story, my story, and I was the only one who could see it. The road was US 95, a long, straight, and profoundly empty stretch of highway that connects Las Vegas to Reno. It's a road that tests your sanity. The landscape is a monotonous, hypnotic cycle of sagebrush, brown hills, and a sky so vast and empty it feels like it could swallow you whole. I had been driving for hours, the only car on the road lost in the rhythm of the highway. It was late afternoon when I saw the first billboard. It was a strange sight out here. Most billboards on these lonely roads are for cheap casino hotels or legal services, their colors faded and peeling from the relentless sun. This one was different. It was new, pristine, its colors bright and vibrant. It was an advertisement for a housing development. It showed a picture of a perfect, happy suburban family. A handsome, smiling father with kind eyes, a beautiful, radiant mother with a warm, loving smile, a teenage son with a confident, athletic grin, and a younger daughter, about 10 years old, with bright, curious eyes and a sweet, innocent smile. They were standing in front of a beautiful modern house, the picture of the American dream. The text above them was simple and cheerful. "Welcome home. The good life awaits at Aspen Meadows." I thought it was odd. A new housing development in the middle of this desolate wasteland? It made no sense. But I was a photographer of strange things, so I pulled over, got out my camera, and took a few shots of the bizarrely out-of-place billboard. The family in the photo was almost too perfect. Their smiles were a little too wide, their eyes a little too bright. It was uncanny. I shrugged, got back in my car, and drove on. I drove for another 30 miles. The landscape did not change. Sagebrush, brown hills, empty sky. And then I saw another billboard. It was the same billboard. Same pristine condition, same bright colors, same housing development. Aspen Meadows. And the same family. But it wasn't the same. I slowed down, my photographer's eye for detail immediately sensing that something was different. I pulled over again and looked closely. The family was the same. The house was the same. But their positions had changed. The father now had his arm around the mother. The son had his hand on the daughter's shoulder. They were closer together. And their expressions, they were different. The smiles were still there, but they were less bright. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. A hint of concern in the mother's eyes. A shadow of anxiety in the father's smile. This was impossible. It had to be a different billboard, a variation in the ad campaign. That was the only logical explanation. But it was unsettling. It felt less like an advertisement and more like a single frame from a story. I took another picture, my heart beating a little faster. I drove on, my mind racing. 20 miles later, the third billboard appeared. I knew it was coming. I felt it before I saw it. I pulled over, my hands clammy on the steering wheel. I didn't even get out of the car this time, I just stared. It was the same family, the same house, but the story had progressed. The sky in the picture was darker, the sun lower on the horizon. The family was huddled together now. The smiles were gone. They were replaced by expressions of open, naked fear. The mother was clutching the daughter, whose face was buried in her mother's side. The son was standing slightly in front of them, his body tense, his expression a mixture of defiance and terror. And the father was looking out of the billboard. Not at the camera. He was looking out down the road in the direction I was heading, and his face was a mask of pure primal dread. He was looking at something that was coming, and the text on the billboard had changed. The cheerful welcome home was gone. It now read in the same cheerful font, "Lock your doors, it's getting dark." I was no longer a detached observer. I was a part of this story. The billboard was talking to me. I drove away from that billboard as fast as my car would go. This was not a prank. This was not a clever ad campaign. This was something else. Something ancient and strange and deeply, deeply wrong. The road was communicating with me, using the language of advertising to tell me a horror story. I had to get off this road. I looked at my map. The next town, Goldfield, was about 40 miles away. I could make it. I would get a motel room, lock the door, and wait for the sun to come up. The sun was setting now, the desert sky turning a bruised, bloody purple. My car was the only point of light in a world that was sinking into darkness. 15 miles, the fourth billboard. I saw it from a distance, its pristine white surface glowing in the twilight. I didn't want to look. I told myself not to look, but I couldn't help it. I slowed down, my eyes drawn to it like a moth to a flame. The picture had changed dramatically. It was night in the world of the billboard. The beautiful house was dark, except for a single small yellow light in an upstairs window. The family was gone. They were no longer outside, but they were not safe. In the foreground of the picture, at the edge of the perfectly manicured lawn, a figure was standing. It was just a silhouette, a tall, thin, and impossibly black shape against the twilight sky. It had no features. It was just a void, a man-shaped hole in the world. And it was looking at the house. It was looking at the single lit window, and the text on the billboard, the cheerful, friendly text, now read, "It's here!" I screamed. I stomped on the gas pedal, my car lurching forward. I was no longer just a reader of this story. I was the main character. The billboards were not just telling a story, they were telling my story. The happy family was me, on my happy, carefree road trip. And the darkness, the thing that was coming, it was coming for me. I drove with a blind animal terror. Goldfield. I just had to make it to Goldfield, 10 miles out of town, the fifth billboard. I didn't slow down this time. I just glanced at it as I sped past. A fleeting, nightmarish image burned into my brain. The picture was a close-up. It was the face of the father from the family. His eyes were wide with a terror so absolute, so profound, that it made my own soul ache. His mouth was open in a silent scream. And reflected in his wide, terrified eyes, I could see it. The tall, thin, black silhouette. It was no longer on the lawn. It was inside the house with him. The text on the billboard was a single, terrible word. Goodbye. That was the last billboard. I made it to Goldfield. It was a small, dusty, half-ghost town, but it had streetlights and a motel and other people. It was civilization. It was safety. I checked into the motel. I locked the door. I bolted it. I wedged a chair under the doorknob. I sat on the bed, shaking, and I waited for the sun to come up. I did not sleep. The next morning, I got in my car and I drove. I did not go back the way I came. I took a different highway, a longer route, but one that I knew was free of those terrible, pristine storytelling billboards. I am a photographer. I am a man who seeks out the strange and the empty, but I have never gone back to that stretch of US 95. I have never tried to find Aspen Meadows. I have tried to rationalize what happened. A sophisticated psychological art installation, a prank by some desert-dwelling eccentric, a hallucination brought on by the hypnotic monotony of the road. But I have the pictures, I have the 5 photographs I took of the billboards. I have shown them to people, they see what I see. A series of advertisements. But they don't feel what I feel, they don't see the story, they don't feel the creeping personal dread. I have a theory. The road is a lonely place, and it is sentient. It gets bored, and sometimes it chooses a traveler, a single lonely car in its vast empty expanse, and it decides to tell them a story. It uses the language it knows, the language of billboards, of advertisements, of cheerful empty promises. It creates a narrative just for you. A personalized horror story delivered in 20-mile increments. It is a game between you and the road. The road tells you a story of encroaching doom, and your part of the game is to outrun the ending. I think I won. I made it to the town. I got off the road before the final billboard, the one that would have shown the aftermath. But sometimes I wonder, what would that final billboard have shown? An empty house? Or a new family, a new perfect, smiling family standing on the lawn? A family with my face, my smile, my eyes trapped forever in a pristine, brightly colored advertisement for a place that doesn't exist, waiting for the next lonely traveler to come along. I don't know. And I don't want to find out. I just know that the empty spaces are not empty, they are watching. And they are telling stories. And you do not want to be the main character. Story 8, The Car Wash. My name is Greg. I'm a night shift nurse. My life is a backwards version of everyone else's. I sleep when the world is awake, and I work when the world is asleep. My commute home at 3 or 4 in the morning is a strange, lonely journey through a silent, sleeping city. I've always found a kind of peace in it. But one morning, after a particularly brutal 12-hour shift, I made a stop that I will regret for the rest of my life. I stopped at a 24-hour automatic car wash. I just wanted to wash away the grime and the exhaustion of the night, but something else was waiting for me in that tunnel of soap and water. Something that wanted to leave its own stain. This was in the winter of 2021. The city was covered in a layer of dirty gray slush from a recent snowfall. My car was filthy, caked in salt and road grime. I was bone-tired, my mind a fuzzy, exhausted blank from a night of dealing with sickness and suffering. As I was driving home, I saw the glowing, cheerful sign of the sparkle-bright 24-hour car wash. It was one of those fully automated drive-through places. You just pull up, pay with a card, and a machine does the rest. It seemed like a good idea. A small, simple act of cleansing to mark the end of a long, hard night. I pulled in. The place was deserted, a brightly lit island in a sea of dark, empty parking lots. I pulled up to the payment kiosk, inserted my card, and selected the deluxe wash. The metal door to the car wash tunnel rumbled open, revealing a dark, wet, and vaguely menacing maw. A series of green blinking arrows beckoned me forward. I drove into the tunnel. The door rumbled shut behind me, plunging me into a world of semi-darkness, lit only by the colored lights of the machinery. The familiar process began. The pre-soaked jets sprayed my car with a fine mist. The giant soapy brushes descended, their soft, heavy bristles thumping and rubbing against the car's body. It was a familiar, comforting, and mindless process. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes just for a second. And then I heard a sound that did not belong. It was a soft, rhythmic thump. Thump, thump, coming from the roof of my car. My eyes snapped open. The giant rotating brushes were on the sides of my car, not the top. There was nothing that should have been making that sound. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps walking on the roof of my car. My heart began to pound. That was impossible. I was inside a sealed, automated car wash. There was no one in here with me. The soap cycle finished and the rinse jets kicked in, spraying my car with high-pressure water. The sound of the footsteps was drowned out by the roar of the water. I told myself I had imagined it. The strange acoustics of the tunnel, my own exhaustion. It had to be. The rinse cycle ended. The world fell silent for a moment before the final stage, the high-powered dryers. In that brief, dripping silence, I heard it again. But it was different this time. It was a scratching sound, a long, slow, and deliberate scrape coming from the roof. It sounded like someone was dragging their fingernails, long, hard fingernails, across the metal. Scrape, scrape, and then a new sound, a soft, wet, and utterly sickening sound, the sound of something licking the windshield, a long, slow, and rhythmic slurp, slurp, right in front of my face. I couldn't see anything through the water streaming down the glass, but I could hear it. I was not alone in the tunnel. I was frozen in my seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind a screaming chaos of pure, undiluted terror. The dryers kicked in, a deafening roar of hot air. The noise was a relief, drowning out the terrible, intimate sounds from outside. The final green arrow lit up, signaling that the wash was complete. The door in front of me began to rumble open. I didn't wait for it to open all the way. The moment the gap was wide enough, I stomped on the gas pedal. My car shot out of the car wash, back into the cold, empty, and blessedly normal light of the pre-dawn city. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove, my body shaking, my mind replaying those terrible, impossible sounds. After a few minutes, I started to calm down. It had to be a dream. A waking nightmare brought on by extreme fatigue. A micro-sleep. That was the only rational explanation. I pulled over to the side of the road under a streetlight to collect myself. My car was gleaming, the deluxe wash having done its job. It was clean. Except for the roof. I don't know why I looked. Some morbid, self-destructive curiosity. I got out of the car and I looked at the roof. It was not clean. It was covered in long, deep parallel scratches gouged into the metal, as if a giant three-fingered hand had raked its claws across it. And that wasn't the worst part. In the center of the roof there was a large, wet, and smeared patch. It was a dark, reddish-brown color. And in the center of the smear there was something left behind. It was a single, long, and impossibly thick strand of what looked like hair. It was coarse, and black, and oily, and it was stuck to the roof of my car. And the windshield was covered in a strange, translucent, and slimy residue in the exact spot where I had heard the licking sound. I was not dreaming. It was real. Something had been on my car. Something had been in that tunnel with me. I got back in my car and drove straight to the police station. I was probably a sight to behold, a wild-eyed, babbling nurse trying to explain to a tired, skeptical desk sergeant that a monster had attacked me in a car wash. He listened with a kind of weary patience. He took my statement, but I could see it in his eyes. He thought I was crazy or drunk or on drugs. "All right, sir," he said, his voice placating. "Let's go have a look at your car." We walked out to the parking lot. I led him to my car, my heart pounding. "See?" I said, pointing to the roof. "The scratches, the residue." The sergeant looked at the roof. He was silent for a long moment. He ran a hand over the smooth, clean, and completely undamaged surface. "Sir," he said, his voice gentle as if talking to a child, "there's nothing here." I stared at the roof. The scratches were gone. The reddish-brown smear was gone. The single coarse black hair was gone. The roof was as clean and shiny and perfect as the rest of the car. "No," I whispered. "No, it was there. I saw it." "Maybe you should go home and get some sleep, sir," the sergeant said, giving me a look of pity. "You've had a long night." He was right. I had had a long night. But I was not crazy. I drove home in a daze. Had I imagined it all? Was the stress of my job finally breaking my mind? I parked my car in my garage. As I got out, I noticed something on the floor of the passenger seat. It was a small folded piece of paper. A receipt. It was from the Sparkle Bright car wash. I picked it up. It had the date, the time, and the amount I had paid. And at the bottom, in a cheerful computer-printed font, was a message I had not seen before. "Thank you for your purchase. We hope you enjoyed your wash. Please come again." And underneath that, a second line of text. A line that made my blood run cold. "P.S. He says you taste like coffee and exhaustion. He hopes you come back soon. He's still hungry." I sold the car the next week. I quit my job. I moved to a different city, a city that is sunny and dry and has very few automatic car washes. I don't know what that thing was. A creature that lives in the dark, wet, and lonely places of the city? A car wash gremlin? A manifestation of the city's own grime and forgotten horrors? I don't have any answers, but I have a receipt. A receipt that I keep locked in a box. A receipt that proves that I am not crazy. And I know that there are things that live in the spaces we create but do not inhabit. The dark tunnels, the empty basements, the forgotten corners. They are waiting, and they are hungry. And sometimes all they want is a taste. So be careful where you go to wash away the dirt of the world. You might just end up on the menu. Story 9. The Lost Dog Poster. My name is Jenna. I'm a veterinarian. My life revolves around a simple, powerful love for animals. I'm the person who will swerve to avoid a squirrel. The person who will stop traffic to help a turtle cross the road. My compassion for creatures, big and small, is the core of who I am. In the spring of 2023, on a lonely road trip through the backwoods of northern Florida, that compassion was used against me. It was turned into a key that unlocked a cage I didn't even know I was in. I stopped to help a lost dog. But the dog wasn't the one who was lost. I was. And the poster wasn't a plea for help. It was bait. I was driving to a veterinary conference in Atlanta. I had decided to take the scenic route, a 2-day drive through the winding, beautiful, and deeply isolated roads of the Florida Panhandle. The landscape was a lush, green, and almost suffocating tapestry of pine forests, cypress swamps, and hanging Spanish moss. The air was thick and wet and heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay. It was late afternoon on my first day. I was on a county road, a narrow strip of asphalt cutting through a dense, dark forest. I hadn't seen another car for miles. It was just me, my car, and the endless green tunnel of trees. I saw the poster tacked to a large old oak tree on the side of the road. It was a piece of rain-warped cardboard with words written in a thick black marker. The drawing was crude, almost childish. "Lost dog," it read. "His name is Buddy. He is a good boy. We miss him. Please help." Below the words was a simple, hand-drawn picture of a golden retriever with a big, happy, cartoonish smile. And at the bottom, an address, no phone number, just an address. 112 Blackwater Lane. My heart ached. The thought of a lost, scared dog alone in these vast, dangerous woods, it was unbearable. I made a mental note of the address just in case. I drove on, the image of the sad, hand-drawn poster stuck in my mind. About 5 miles down the road, I saw him, trotting out of the woods. Onto the shoulder of the road was a golden retriever. He was beautiful, but he was a mess. His coat was matted with mud and burrs, he was limping slightly, and he looked thin and exhausted. He stopped on the shoulder and looked at me, his head cocked, his tail giving a single, hopeful thump against the ground. It had to be Buddy. I pulled over immediately. I opened my car door. "Hey, boy," I called, my voice soft and gentle. "Hey, Buddy, it's okay, come on." The dog hesitated for a moment, then, as if sensing a friend, he limped towards me, his tail wagging tentatively. He was a good boy. He was just lost and scared. He let me check him over. He had a few scratches and his paw was sore, but he was otherwise unharmed. He was wearing a simple worn leather collar, but there was no tag. I coaxed him into the back seat of my car. He curled up on the seat, letting out a deep, weary sigh, and immediately fell asleep. I had to take him home. I looked at my map. Blackwater Lane wasn't on it, but these old country roads often had unofficial names. I turned the car around and headed back towards the poster. I found the turnoff for Blackwater Lane just past the tree with the poster. It was a narrow, unpaved, and deeply rutted dirt track, disappearing into the dark, dense woods. My small sedan was not made for this kind of road, but I couldn't leave the dog. I drove slowly, the car's undercarriage scraping and bumping on the rough road. The trees pressed in on all sides, their branches forming a thick, dark canopy that blocked out the late afternoon sun. The air grew still and heavy and silent. After about a mile, I saw a clearing ahead. In the center of the clearing was a house. It was a small, dilapidated, and deeply unsettling place. It was a ramshackle cabin built from unpainted, weathered wood. The windows were small, dark, and grimy. The porch was sagging. The yard was a mess of rusted metal, old tires and weeds. A single bare light bulb burned over the front door, casting a sickly yellow glow in the deepening twilight. This had to be the place. 112 Blackwater Lane. I parked the car, my heart beginning to pound with a new and unwelcome sense of dread. This place felt wrong, deeply wrong. Buddy in the back seat woke up. He did not seem happy to be home. He let out a low, soft whine and pressed himself against the far door as if trying to get as far away from the house as possible. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, though I was trying to convince myself as much as him. "We're just returning you to your family." I got out of the car. The silence here was different. It was not the peaceful silence of the forest. It was a dead, watchful, and hungry silence. I walked up to the front door and knocked. The sound was loud and hollow in the still air. I waited. There was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Hello? I think I found your dog." I heard a sound from inside, a slow, shuffling, dragging sound. The sound of something heavy being moved. The door creaked open just a few inches. A face appeared in the crack. It was a woman. She was old. Her face a pale, wrinkled mask, her hair a mess of thin, gray strands. But her eyes were the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. They were a bright, sharp, and shockingly intelligent blue, and they were filled with a cold, predatory, and triumphant glee. "You found our Buddy," she said, her voice a dry, crackling whisper. "Oh, thank you, dearie. We were so worried." She opened the door wider. "Please," she said, her smile revealing a set of brown, crooked teeth. "Come in. You must be tired. Let me offer you some tea." "No, that's okay," I said, my instincts screaming at me to run. "I just wanted to return your dog. I have to get going." "Nonsense," she said, her voice taking on a sharp, insistent edge. "We must thank you properly. It's the least we can do." She stepped out onto the porch. She was not alone. A man emerged from the shadows of the house behind her. He was large and stooped and silent. He had the same pale skin, the same messy hair, and the same terrifyingly intelligent, bright blue eyes. "My brother, Silas," the old woman said with a wave of her hand. "He's not much for talking, but he's very grateful." Silas just stared at me, his face blank, his blue eyes boring into me. "Now where is our sweet buddy?" the woman asked, looking past me towards my car. As if on cue, Buddy began to bark from inside the car. It was not a happy bark. It was a frantic, terrified, and desperate sound. "He seems a little agitated," the woman said, her smile widening. "The journey must have been stressful for him." "Silas, why don't you go and get our boy?" Silas began to walk towards my car, his movements slow and heavy and relentless. "No, wait," I said, stepping in front of him. "I'll get him. He's a little scared." "Oh, he's not scared of us, dearie," the woman said with a dry chuckle. "He's just reluctant to come home. He's a bit of a runaway. We're always having to put up the posters for him." She looked at me, her blue eyes twinkling with a horrible, knowing light. "He's very good at his job, though. He always brings someone home for dinner." The meaning of her words hit me like a physical blow. Buddy wasn't their lost pet. He was their lure. He was their bait, the poster, the lost dog act. It was all a trap designed to prey on the compassion of strangers, a trap designed for people exactly like me. Silas pushed past me, his strength surprising. He opened the back door of my car. Buddy cowered in the corner, whimpering. Silas reached in, grabbed the dog by the collar, and dragged him out. He did not treat the dog like a beloved pet. He treated it like a tool, a piece of equipment. "Now," the old woman said, turning her terrible, smiling face back to me. "About that tea." I didn't think. I just ran. I sprinted back to the driver's side of my car, jumped in, and slammed the door. I jammed the key into the ignition, and the engine roared to life. Silas was standing by the back of the car, holding the whimpering Buddy by the scruff of his neck. The old woman was on the porch, her face contorted with a sudden, furious rage. "You can't leave!" she shrieked, her voice no longer a whisper, but a high, thin, and terrible sound. "You're our guest, you're our thank you. You're the meal." I threw the car into reverse. Silas was standing in the way. I didn't care. I stomped on the gas. The car shot backwards. Silas, with a surprising, unnatural agility, jumped out of the way. But in his haste, he let go of the dog. Buddy, free, shot off into the woods, a golden blur disappearing into the darkness. I spun the wheel, put the car in drive, and sped down the rutted dirt track, away from that terrible house, away from those terrible people. In my rearview mirror, I could see them. The old woman and the large, silent man standing in the yard watching me go. They were not chasing me. They were just watching. And the old woman was smiling again, that same cold, triumphant smile. It was a smile that said, "We'll get the next one." I made it back to the paved road. I drove all night, not stopping until I reached the bright, noisy, and safe streets of Atlanta. I reported it to the police. I gave them the location, the description of the house, of the man and the woman. A patrol car was dispatched. They found the turnoff for Blackwater Lane, but the road was overgrown, impassable. It hadn't been used in years. They went in on foot. They found the clearing. But there was no house, no cabin, no rusted metal, no old tires. There was nothing. Just an empty, silent clearing in the middle of the woods, except for one thing. Nailed to an old oak tree at the edge of the clearing, they found a piece of weathered cardboard. On it, in a crude, childish hand, were the words, "Lost our guest. She was a good girl. We miss her. Please help." And below the words was a crude, hand-drawn picture of a woman with long, dark hair. A picture of me. I am a veterinarian. I have dedicated my life to helping animals. But I am a different person now. My compassion has been curdled by a terrible, chilling knowledge. I know that there are monsters in this world that wear human skin. And I know that they are clever. They understand us. They know what we value. They know how to turn our best qualities, our kindness, our empathy, our love for a lost and helpless creature, into a weapon against us. I still help animals, but I no longer stop on lonely roads. Because I know that some traps are not made of steel and teeth. They are made of cardboard and marker and a story about a good boy named Buddy. And I was just the bait that got away. Story 10. The Phantom Lane. My name is Michael. I'm a creature of habit and logic. As a software engineer, my world is governed by code, by predictable outcomes, by the clear, binary distinction between true and false. I believe in systems, in rules, in the predictable physics of the world. But in the autumn of 2022, on a routine drive across the vast empty expanse of the I-80 in Wyoming, I found a bug in the system. I found a piece of code that shouldn't have been there. I found a lane on the highway that wasn't on any map. And when I entered it, I exited the world I knew. I was driving from Salt Lake City to Omaha for a tech conference. It's a long, notoriously boring drive, a straight, flat, and endless ribbon of asphalt through a landscape of brown, rolling hills and a sky that feels too big for the earth beneath it. To break the monotony, I always drove it at night. The world shrinks to the small, focused tunnel of your headlights, and the journey becomes a kind of moving meditation. It was around 2 a.m. I was in the middle of the most desolate stretch of Wyoming, a place where the distance between exits is measured in hours, not miles. The highway was a 3-lane affair in each direction, though at this time of night it was completely empty. I was the only soul on the road, a single point of light in a vast, sleeping darkness. I was in the middle lane, my cruise control set to a steady 75 miles per hour, listening to a podcast about quantum computing. My world was calm, predictable, and logical. And then, I saw it. To my left, a new lane had appeared. I blinked, my logical mind immediately trying to process the data. The highway had been 3 lanes, I was sure of it. But now, there were 4. A new 4th lane had materialized to my left, between my lane and the median. It was a perfect lane. The asphalt was a deep, pristine, unblemished black, as if it had been freshly paved just moments ago. The white dashed lines that marked its borders were crisp and bright, and seemed to glow with a faint internal luminescence. There were no signs indicating a new lane was beginning, no construction warnings. It had simply appeared. It had branched off from the existing road so smoothly, so seamlessly, that it felt like it had always been there. My first thought was that I had missed a sign, that this was a new HOV lane or an express lane that had been recently added. But there were no other cars, no signs, no indication of its purpose. It was just an empty, perfect, and silent lane, running parallel to my own. My curiosity, the engineer's desire to understand a new system, got the better of me. The lane looked so smooth, so perfect. My own lane was worn, cracked, and patched. I signaled, checked my mirror, though there was nothing to see, and I moved into the new lane. The moment my tires crossed the glowing white line, the world changed. It was not a sudden, violent shift. It was a soft, subtle, and deeply unsettling transition. The first thing I noticed was the sound. The familiar rhythmic hum of my tires on the asphalt vanished. The new lane was utterly, completely, and impossibly silent. My car, a machine of controlled explosions and friction, was moving at 75 miles per hour in absolute silence. The second thing I noticed was the feeling. The road was not just smooth, it was frictionless. There was no vibration, no sense of motion. It felt as if my car was not driving but floating, gliding effortlessly through the night. And the third thing, the thing that made my blood run cold, was the world outside. The familiar brown, rolling hills of Wyoming were gone. The vast, starry sky was gone. On either side of the phantom lane there was nothing. Just a deep, profound, and featureless blackness. A perfect, silent, and infinite void. The only things that existed in this new reality were my car, the perfect black asphalt of the lane, and the glowing white lines that stretched ahead into the darkness. Forever. I was no longer on I-80. I was somewhere else. I was on a road that was not a road, in a place that was not a place. Panic, a cold, logical, and absolute panic seized me. I yanked the steering wheel to the right, trying to get back into the normal lanes, back to the real world. But there was nothing there. The other lanes were gone. The rest of the highway had vanished. I was trapped. I slammed on my brakes. The car did not slow down. The brakes had no effect. The frictionless surface offered no purchase. I was still moving forward at a steady, unchangeable 75 miles per hour, in absolute silence, through an absolute void. My engineer's mind raced, trying to find a logical solution. I turned off the cruise control. Nothing. I shifted the car into neutral. Nothing. I turned off the engine. The car's internal lights and dashboard went dark, but the car itself continued to glide forward, its headlights still cutting a tunnel through the blackness at the same relentless, unchangeable speed. I was no longer a driver. I was a passenger. I was a piece of data moving through a system whose rules I did not understand. I don't know how long I was in that place. Time had no meaning there. It could have been minutes, it could have been years. My existence was reduced to a single terrifying and monotonous constant. The silent, effortless glide down a perfect black road, through an endless, featureless void. I did not see any other cars. I did not see any signs. I did not see any exits. The road did not curve. It was a single, straight, and infinitely long line. I went through stages: panic, despair, resignation, and finally a strange and terrifying and almost peaceful acceptance. My logical mind, deprived of all other input, began to study my new reality. I was in a closed system, a perfect frictionless one-out and perpetual motion machine. It was, in its own terrible way, beautiful. I was so lost in my thoughts, in my analysis of this impossible place, that I almost missed it. In the distance ahead of me, a light appeared. It was not a headlight. It was a single, small red light hovering in the center of the lane. As I got closer, I saw that it was a toll booth. It was a structure that was as impossible as the road itself. It was a single skeletal black metal booth suspended in the void. A single red light glowed above it, and a single thin black gate blocked the lane. As my car approached, it began to slow down, smoothly, silently, and of its own accord. It came to a perfect, gentle stop in front of the booth. A figure was inside the booth. It was a tall, thin, and deeply shadowed shape. I could not make out its face. A long, thin, and impossibly pale hand emerged from the booth's window. It was not beckoning. It was just open, waiting. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice a dry, unused croak in the silent car. A voice answered, not from the booth, but from inside my own head. It was not a voice of words. It was a voice of pure, direct, and logical concept. It was a voice of code. Toll required for exit. Payment, 1-1. Logical impossibility. A logical impossibility? What did that even mean? Present a paradox, a contradiction, a truth that cannot be. This is the currency of the void. My mind, the mind of a software engineer, a man who lived in a world of logic, reeled. This place, this road, it fed on the illogical. It was a system that was powered by the things that broke other systems. I had to think. My life depended on it. I had to find a bug in the code of reality. I thought of the classic paradoxes. This statement is false. The barber who shaves all who do not shave themselves. Would that work? It seemed too simple. The pale hand remained open, waiting. Patient. I had to give it something real, something from my own experience, a logical impossibility that I myself had witnessed. And then, I knew. I closed my eyes. I focused my mind. And I presented my payment. I presented the memory of the phantom lane itself. I presented the image of a fourth lane, appearing from nowhere on a 3-lane highway. I presented the feeling of a frictionless surface that defied the laws of physics. I presented the sound of a car moving at 75 miles per hour in absolute silence. I presented the existence of this very road, this very place. I presented the system with a description of itself. The ultimate paradox, the thing that cannot be is. The voice in my head was silent for a long, long moment. The pale hand trembled slightly. And then, the voice returned. Payment accepted, logic error detected, system rebooting. The red light on the toll booth flickered and went out. The black gate lifted silently. The pale hand retracted into the booth. My car began to move forward again, gliding through the now open toll booth. As I passed it, I risked a glance inside. There was no one there. The booth was empty. I drove on, and the world began to return. Faintly at first, I could see the ghostly outlines of the Wyoming hills through the blackness. The stars began to fade back into existence in the sky. The familiar rhythmic hum of my tires on the asphalt returned. And then, with a soft, jarring lurch, my car was back on the I-80. I was in the middle lane. The highway had 3 lanes. The phantom lane was gone. I was back. I pulled over to the side of the road, my body shaking with a violent, uncontrollable tremor. I looked at my dashboard. The clock read 2:03 a.m. I had been gone for what felt like an eternity. But in the real world, only a few minutes had passed. I am a software engineer. I am a man of logic. I have spent the last year trying to find a logical explanation for what happened. I have studied quantum physics, theoretical mechanics, the philosophy of reality. I have found no answers, but I have a theory. The universe is a piece of software, a vast, complex, and ancient operating system, and like any piece of software, it has bugs. It has hidden subroutines, forgotten lines of code, and sometimes on a lonely road in the middle of the night, you can accidentally trigger one. You can find a back door, a hidden pathway, a phantom lane that takes you outside the normal operating parameters of the system. It is a place where the rules are different, a place that is not meant for us, a place that runs on a different kind of logic. I won my freedom by presenting the system with a paradox it could not resolve. I forced a reboot, but I am left with a terrifying question. What other bugs are out there waiting to be found? What other phantom lanes exist on the lonely highways of the world? And what is the toll required to exit them? I still drive, but I am a different driver now. I am a man who is afraid of straight, empty roads. I am a man who is constantly checking his mirrors not for other cars, but for the appearance of a new perfect and impossible lane. Because I know that the world is not as solid or as logical or as real as we think it is. It is a system, and every system can be broken. And I am terrified that one day I will take another wrong turn and I will find myself back on that silent black road. And this time I might not have a paradox to pay the toll. Story 11. The Final Toll. My name is Arthur. I am a man at the end of a very long road. For 40 years I was a traveling salesman, a road warrior. My life was a blur of highways, motels, and lonely cups of coffee. I drove through every state. saw every landscape this country has to offer. The road was my home, my office, and my oldest, most constant companion. Now, I am retired. And in the autumn of my life, I decided to take one last road trip, a final great journey to see all the places I had rushed through, to savor the journey itself, not just the destination. My destination was a small, quiet town on the coast of Maine, where I planned to live out my final years by the sea. But on a forgotten stretch of road in the Appalachian Mountains, I came to a toll booth that wasn't on any map, and the man inside asked for a toll that was more than I could ever have imagined paying. He asked for the destination itself. This was just last year. I was driving through the mountains of West Virginia on a road so old and forgotten it had been reclaimed by the forest. It was a beautiful winding road, a canopy of brilliant autumn leaves, red and gold and orange, forming a tunnel of color above me. It was late afternoon, the light soft and golden. I was happy. I was at peace. I came around a sharp bend, and I had to slam on my brakes. The road was blocked. Spanning the narrow mountain pass was a toll plaza. It was an ancient, archaic structure, the kind that hadn't existed on American highways for half a century. It was made of dark, weathered wood and rusting metal. There were 3 lanes, each with a single skeletal black and white striped gate arm blocking the way. 2 of the booths were dark and empty, their windows boarded up. But the middle booth, the one directly in front of me, had a single dim yellow light bulb glowing inside. And there was a man in the booth. This was impossible. This road was a dead end, a forgotten relic. There was no reason for a toll plaza to be here. It was like finding a shipwreck on a mountaintop. I sat in my car, my engine idling, a sense of profound, dreamlike dislocation washing over me. The man in the booth did not move. He was just a silhouette against the dim yellow light. I thought about turning back, but the road behind me seemed to have vanished. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I did not see the sun-dappled autumn road I had been driving on. I saw only a thick, gray, featureless fog, a wall of nothingness that seemed to be pressing in on the back of my car. There was no way back. The only way was forward. With a deep sense of dread, I put the car in drive and rolled slowly up to the middle toll booth. The man inside was old, impossibly old. His face was a pale, translucent, and deeply wrinkled parchment, his eyes 2 small, dark, and weary points of light. He was wearing an old, faded gray uniform, the kind a toll collector might have worn in the 1950s. I rolled down my window. The air was cold and smelled of damp earth and rust and something else. Something like old, forgotten paper. I think I'm lost, I said, my voice sounding small and thin. This road wasn't on my map. The old man smiled, a slow, tired, and deeply sad smile. The road is not lost, friend, he said, his voice a dry, soft, rustling whisper. You are. But you are almost at the end of it. The end? I asked. What's on the other side of this? The rest of your journey, he said simply. But there is a toll. There is always a toll. I reached for my wallet. Of course, I said. How much? The old man held up a thin, pale, and almost transparent hand. I have no use for your money, friend, he whispered. The toll for this gate is different. It is the final toll. What do you mean, the final toll? To pass through this gate, the old man said, his dark, weary eyes fixing on mine, you must pay with your destination. I stared at him, my mind struggling to grasp his meaning. My destination? You mean the town I'm going to? I mean the very idea of it, he whispered. The memory of it, the desire for it. The name of the town, the image of the house by the sea, the feeling of the salt spray on your face, the peace you hope to find there. All of it. You must give it to me. You must surrender your destination completely and utterly. You must become a traveler with no place to go. This was madness. A cruel, senile joke. Why? I asked, my voice trembling. Why would I do that? Because that is the price of passage, the old man said, his voice filled with an infinite, ancient weariness. This is the gate of the journey. It is for those who have come to love the road more than the arrival. To pass, you must prove that the journey itself is enough. You must let go of the end and embrace the endlessness of the road. I looked in my rearview mirror again. The gray, featureless fog was closer now, swirling at my back bumper. There was no going back. What happens if I don't pay? I whispered. The old man's sad smile returned. Then you will stay here, friend, he said softly. You will stay here at the gate with me until you are ready to let go. Time is different here, you can wait. I looked at him, at his pale, translucent skin, at his weary, ancient eyes, and I understood. He was a traveler who had arrived at this gate long, long ago, and he had refused to pay. He could not let go of his destination. And so, he had become the toll collector. He was trapped, a ghost in a forgotten booth, his own journey forever incomplete. I was a man at the end of a long road. My whole life had been a journey, and my destination, the small, quiet town by the sea, it was more than just a place. It was a promise of rest, of peace, of a final quiet harbor after a lifetime on the road. To give it up, it was to give up hope. It was to give up my own ending. But the fog was at my windows now, a cold, gray, and silent presence. I had a choice. To be trapped here forever, a prisoner of my own destination, or to pay the toll, to give up my ending and to drive on into the unknown, to become a true traveler, a man on a road that never ends. I closed my eyes. I thought of the town. I thought of the small white house with the blue shutters. I thought of the sound of the gulls, the smell of the salt, the feeling of the cold, clean ocean breeze. I held the image, the feeling, the hope in my mind. It was the most precious thing I had left. I'm ready, I whispered. I felt a cold, gentle, and profound emptiness wash over me. It was not a violent taking. It was a soft, sad, and final release. It was the feeling of a book being closed, of a story being finished, of a promise being broken. When I opened my eyes, the memory was gone. I knew I had been going somewhere, but I could not remember where. The image of the house, the smell of the sea, it was a blank space, a void. I was a man with a past but no future, a driver with no destination. The old man was looking at me, and there were tears in his dark, weary eyes. "Thank you, friend," he whispered. "You are a true traveler." The black and white gate arm in front of my car lifted silently. "The road is open," the old man said. "Drive safe." I put the car in drive. I rolled forward through the toll booth and onto the road beyond. The road was different. The brilliant autumn colors were gone. The road was now a simple gray two-lane highway stretching through a landscape of soft, gray, and featureless twilight. There was no sun, no moon, no stars, just a gentle, perpetual, and peaceful dusk. I looked in my rearview mirror. The toll plaza was gone. The fog was gone. There was just the endless gray road stretching out behind me, and the endless gray road stretching out ahead of me. I am still on that road. I think I have been for a very long time. Time is different here. The car never runs out of gas. I never get hungry or tired. I just drive. Sometimes I pass other cars, old classic cars from every decade, a 1950s Bel Air, a 1970s station wagon, a 1990s sedan. The drivers are all like me. They are silent travelers, their faces calm, their eyes empty of destination. We do not acknowledge each other. We are all alone together on this endless final road trip. I am Arthur. I was a salesman. I was a man on his way to a small, quiet town by the sea. But I took a wrong turn, or maybe after a lifetime on the road, I finally took the right one. I came to the final toll, and I paid the price. I am a traveler, and my journey will never ever end. Outro music with the sound of a car engine humming, which slowly fades into a soft, ambient, and slightly melancholic tone. Then silence. The open road is a promise of freedom, a journey into the unknown. But as we've heard tonight, sometimes the unknown is a place you can never leave. The highways and byways of this country are haunted by more than just the ghosts of forgotten travelers. They are haunted by impossible choices, by games with rules you can't understand, and by destinations that are not on any map. Thank you for joining us on this long, dark road trip. If these stories have made you think twice about that next scenic detour, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Your support is the fuel that keeps Mr. Chill Chapters on the road. Until next time, drive safe, check your mirrors, and if you ever come to a toll booth that shouldn't be there, be very, very careful what you're willing to pay.